You're watching Euronews now. I'm Takumbo Silako with your top stories. After all the drama down under, Novak Djokovic is back in his home country where he's being celebrated as a hero. We'll have the latest from Belgrade. Also back on home ground, the former Ukrainian president Petro Poroshenko has returned to Kiev where he faces treason charges. And supporters of the jailed Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny rally to mark a year since the Russian opposition leader was put behind bars. The world's #1 tennis player Novak Djokovic has touched down in Belgrade after being thrown out of Australia for not being vaccinated against COVID-19 and thus ending his hopes of defending his Australian Open title. We heard from the president, who described his treatment by authorities down under as harassment after he lost his appeal against having his visa revoked. Well, let's now go over to the Serbian capital where we can speak to Bojan Brkic. He's an editor of Euronews Serbia and he's standing by reporting for us. Bojan, describe the atmosphere, if you like. We're used to seeing crowds now waiting to hear news of Novak Djokovic. What sort of reception is he likely to receive?
Serbia is full of messages of support and expressions of affection for Novak Djokovic. It has been so for days. Last night, the highest building in Belgrade was illuminated with messages of support for Novak. Everybody in social networks and in the streets, indeed, is chanting Novak, Novak. So in the past, there were a lot of people who disagreed with Novak's lifestyle, with his convictions, views, beliefs, even his dietary habits. But even those people right now say that what Australians did to Novak is not right. So it's safe to say that overwhelming majority of the Serbs are now very supportive of Novak. He's even more of a hero than he was before all this happened. And at the same time, as you can imagine, there's a lot of Australia bashing in the mainstream media as well as on the social networks. People are very disappointed and very angry at Australia about the way they handled Novak Djokovic. They say it was harassment, it wasn't right to give him visa and then keep him basically in prison. And also they are especially appalled by that part of the decision to expel Novak, which said that he was expelled because he represented the views that may be a danger to Australian public order and security. So a lot of anger for Australia, a lot of support for Novak.
Former President Petro Poroshenko is heading back to Ukraine despite facing charges of high treason in the country. Poroshenko said Sunday that he is returning to fight those charges, even though he views them as politically motivated. Poroshenko was defeated by current President Volodymyr Zelensky in 2019 after 5 years in office. At a news conference in Warsaw, hours before his flight to Kiev, he said he feels confident he won't be arrested.
If you ask me if I will be arrested, definitely not. Not because I'm so confident, because I have absolutely zero reason for that. And I hate the idea, and I think that Zelensky make a shoot in their legs, that at the current situation, Zelensky will do these things. But once again, I return to Ukraine to fight for Ukraine, not to fight with Zelensky.
Poroshenko fled Ukraine in December 2021 after being accused of helping pro-Russian separatists sell coal to Kiev. If convicted, he faces up to 15 years in prison.
Sweden will not be caught off guard. That's according to Defence Minister Peter Hultqvist, who dispatched 10 army tanks and dozens of armed soldiers in Visby harbour on Gotland Island. This comes as 3 Russian landing ships sailed into the Baltic Sea through the Great Belt Strait in Denmark last week, amid increased tensions between Russia and NATO. Gotland is strategically located in the Baltic Sea, while the EU Baltic states all share a border with Russia. Stockholm has flexed its military muscle in the past during exercises, but rarely as a direct response to current events. While the Scandinavian country is not a NATO member, it does cooperate closely with the alliance. However, Moscow says there will be grave consequences if Sweden decides to join.
Monsieur le Président.
No vaccine, no café. French lawmakers have swept a controversial bill through Parliament introducing the vaccine pass. After much resistance from both the left and the right, 215 deputies out of a total 280 voted in favour of the measure. From Monday, unvaccinated people over the age of 60 in Greece will need to pay a fine every month. The decision comes as the country's public health system struggles to cope with an increase in cases. However, the lack of available appointments have left some people feeling frustrated. This man says, I booked an appointment on the 11th of January in order to get vaccinated, but the authorities only offered me an appointment from the 31st of January. Why didn't they give me an appointment earlier? It's not my fault, but now they say I should pay a fine. Why? Austria will become the first European country to make COVID-19 vaccinations compulsory for all adults from February. The newly appointed Chancellor, Karl Nehammer, says it's a sensitive subject, but those who don't comply will face a hefty fine. There will be an introductory phase to give people the opportunity to be vaccinated, to be convinced. Meanwhile, thousands of people marched peacefully through the Dutch city of Amsterdam on Sunday to protest the government's coronavirus lockdown measures. While the country has been under strict lockdown since December 19th, non-essential stores can now reopen.
A growing number of UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson's own MPs are calling for him to resign over the so-called Downing Street lockdown parties. The findings of an investigation into the accusations by a senior civil servant could come as early as this week, but that hasn't stopped some members of his own party already calling for him to go.
The pattern of behaviour indicates to me that they think that they can do what they want and the rest of us have got to do as we're told. That is not acceptable to me, it's not acceptable to my constituents, and I don't think it's acceptable behaviour for someone who's leading the country. That makes his position untenable.
But while there was also anger in Boris Johnson's West London constituency, there were those who didn't see the events as career-ending.
I think it's absolutely disgusting that somebody who is supposed to be a leader leads by breaking their own rules. I think it's, to be honest, it's contemptible.
You put your mask, have a distance, and wash your hand. If he's doing all that and he's in his garden, I feel it's okay.
Boris Johnson has undoubtedly angered a lot of people, possibly even the royal family, but many of his MPs, fearing for their own seats, could decide that despite the blunders, he's still the leader most likely to win them the next election.
The birth rate in China has fallen to a 60-year low. According to the country's National Bureau of Statistics, 10.6 million babies were born in 2021, just marginally more than the average mortality rate. Despite reforms to encourage births, like the move to a 3-child policy, the population is aging faster than expected. This decline could have a negative impact on economic growth.
Mourners in New York gathered on Sunday to pay their final respects to victims of last week's fire at a high-rise apartment block in the Bronx. 17 people died, including 8 children. The mass funeral at the Islamic Cultural Center culminated a week of prayers and mourning within a close-knit community with ties to the West African country of Gambia. A tornado ripped through a trailer park in Florida on Sunday as a winter storm combining high winds and ice swept through parts of the American Southeast. The storm knocked out power, felled trees, and coated roads with ice. Tens of thousands of customers were without power in Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Florida.
Time for us to take a break on Good Morning Europe. We'll be back, though, in a few moments.